Hey, everybody. Today I am thrilled to have John Derevlany with me. Now, John is a writer, creator, and brand builder extraordinaire. When I was going through John's bio, trying to decide what to pull out from his creative projects, I was so spoiled for choice. It's like, do I tell you he was Crackers, the corporate crime fighting chicken back in the day on Michael Moore's TV Nation? Or do I mention his speed metal ukulele band, Till You Puke, which is such a fun name? Or importantly, that he has written hundreds of hours of TV and produced TV for big companies like the Jim Henson Company and for Lego and so much more, all of which positions John brilliantly to be a person to help us out with how we can think about storytelling and design that works across multiple platforms, a concept I think is really important to us as creators in today's age. And John is such an expert in this that people hire him to bring sense to it. And I'm going to dig into one of the terms that he's coined, super narrative, what that means in terms of storytelling and design. So many things to ask you about today, John. But before we dive in, is there anything else people should know about you and your work or connections to comedy?
Oh, well, first off, thanks for having me on. I just do try a lot of things
Yeah.
because a lot of them fail and a lot of them fail badly. So you just, 4 out of 5 things I do fail. Some of them succeed. And, I've been managing to pay my rent and, live. So um, that's basically my overall philosophy and keep trying different things. As you can see from your description of what I've done, it's pretty eccentric sometimes.
Yeah, and but really inspiringly so, and so necessary as a creative. So I love it. And normally I don't go back through people's career, but actually you've done so many interesting things that I want to just touch lightly on before we work our way to super narrative, because I do think they're really relevant in terms of comedy and how we like stack our skills up and how we might move from one thing to another. So I'd actually love to go like way back and ask you about founding a comedy newspaper. So I believe that you founded or co-founded the Hoboken Review and also were a contributor to National Lampoon, which
Yeah.
is super fascinating in terms of comedy. If you were just going to pull out one or two things that you really remember from that time or that you feel like you learned from that time in relation to comedy or creating, what do you think they would be?
Well, I could go even farther back. Why I
Okay.
started doing comedy, it
Oh,
was
tell me.
basically, I mostly grew up in a place called Bayside, Queens, which is a very nice neighborhood, but also, especially in the 1970s, really kind of tough. And people are
Mm,
always sort of like fighting. If you're familiar with Donald Trump, Donald
mm,
Trump grew up in Jamaica Estates. That's a few miles away from Bayside. So a lot of people a lot of people have that same sort of abrasive, aggressive alpha male quality, where they're always making up nicknames and always sort of bullying people. That's just how Queens is.
mm,
So I was born later in the year in October. In my entire grade, I was always smaller than everyone. So, you know, I was basically surrounded in a class of these sort of Donald Trump esque characters,
ooh,
and I was like the quiet, you know, book smart guy, trying to, speak in full sentences as opposed to, the common street thug vernacular of Queens.
mm,
And so I was a super easy target to, get bullied and beat up. And I realized if I could make people laugh, they would maybe not punch me in the face.
mm.
Two, maybe confuse them enough that I could run away. So that's where I started honing my, comedy skills, and reading National Lampoon and watching Monty Python, which was like
Mm.
eye opening at the time for me. That there was this other kind of comedy, not this American vaudeville stuff that we fill our sitcoms with. So that's how I started, doing comedy. Didn't realize you could make a living from it, so I went into journalism, and I actually went to journalism school and became a journalist, which is rare because most of the people
Mm.
in journalism programs do something else. And I got a job doing, working for a newspaper in Hoboken, New Jersey, and worked my way up. But worked my way up as a staff of two. I worked my way up from reporter to editor, and eventually the publisher was like, it was the late 80s at that point. There'd been a stock market crash in New York. He's like, oh, everyone's depressed. We're in this economic malaise. It was that late 80s malaise. We need to make people laugh. So I'm going to give you a tiny budget and you're going to make a comedy newspaper. Basically, it was kind of like the Onion. When the Onion came out, it was originally a newspaper. It looked like I actually have copies. It looked something
Oh,
like this,
oh,
and it
fabulous.
was it was called the Hoboken Review, and we basically reviewed things, reviewed like ridiculous things like parking meters or weird books at the library or buffets at strip bars.
Mm.
Which pizzeria in Hoboken had the best celebrity headshots. But it was
Yeah.
an excuse to review things and just sort of make jokes and also sort of maybe reach some sort of truth about the world. And it lasted 21 issues, but it was kind of groundbreaking in a way because it was 1990 when it came out. No one was doing this. There was their college humor magazines, and there was Spy magazine was something that was very prominent in New York at the time. But this was a local Hoboken humor magazine, humor newspaper. The benefit of it was a lot of people in Hoboken also work in media places in New York, and someone from National Lampoon saw that, and I ended up writing for National Lampoon before it went out of business.
Oh.
So, and then of course from there, once you're in National Lampoon, that feeds a lot of the TV comedy TV jobs in New York. So I ended up working at a show on Comedy Central called Night After Night with Alan Havey, which was a late night talk show, just doing gags, reading the newspaper and making jokes. It was
Mm.
every day. So it's pretty brutal.
Yeah. And what do you think that has in common with, if anything, with then Crackers, the corporate crime
Oh,
fighting chicken, in terms of that comedy journalism?
every
What do you think? What function does that fulfill? What's great about it?
I mean everything, because I had an actual real sort of journalism background. I could go out and I
Yeah.
could report things. I mean, I always, whenever I would go to do a story, I was always sort of more interested in like the eccentric qualities of
Mm.
people. Like if it's a mayor or some head of the planning commission and they had
Yeah.
a snow globe collection, I wanted to write about that. Or
Right. Got
I
you.
would somehow, I'd somehow put the really quirkiness of all the people I met. So I was always sort of putting that in my journalism, but at the same time, I was also actually reporting, they changed the zoning laws or the sewage treatment plant is broken or what, the stuff you do in local journalism. So when I eventually moved into comedy, I had this background both in journalism and comedy, and somehow got connected with Michael Moore, and it
Mm.
made a lot of sense at that time because he was literally inventing this new form of TV that's become really prominent now that mixed sort of a journalistic approach with comedy, with humor and sort of
Mm.
stunts. So it was very easy for me to get in there. Once I got in, I mean, I could pitch things and I could say, this will be funny, and it has this point that we can make at the same time.
Mm.
And Crackers. So at the time in the U.S. there was something called McGruff the crime dog. It was this
Mm.
dog mascot. Take a bite out of crime. It was like
Oh.
it was like about street crime.
Yeah.
Report street crime. And Michael's idea was we should do something like that about corporate crime because those are the real criminals.
Yeah.
If you get mugged, that's you lose $50, but there are white collar criminals stealing millions and billions. So we're going to have this corporate crime mascot called Crackers, the corporate crime fighting chicken.
Mm.
And I sort of got put on that as a writer and helping direct it, and I spent a lot of time shouting into the original performer's ear, say this and this, and I said, can I just wear the suit?
Mm.
And I think he thought I had a funny voice, and if I pitch it up, it is kind of a funny voice,
Mm.
but if I pitch it up a little, it sounds even more cartoony, like Crackers, corporate crime fighting chicken,
Yeah.
and at any time doesn't really matter how effective your interview is. The moment you walk into sort of a corporate office dressed as a giant chicken,
Mm.
you win.
Right.
The CEO at the other end of the table has lost because for some dumb reason he saw a camera and he wanted to be on TV and he didn't realize it would be an interview with a giant chicken. So
Yeah. And when you think back to like what you were sort of itching to get the other person to say, what do you think you were trying to do, if there were any patterns, to make the joke work better or to make it be sharper? What kind of things do you think you could see that
uh,
maybe they couldn't?
it wasn't that hard.
Was it not?
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
it was like an 8 foot tall chicken, and
Yeah.
I mean, I'd ask hard hitting questions. What why?
Right.
I don't know why didn't you correct the pollution at this factory? But when it's coming out of the mouth of a chicken, and
Yeah.
then when
Right.
the person would give a scene, a serious response, you cut back to the reaction shot of me being a chicken or sniffing my wings or something.
Right.
It was
Right.
almost like doing a straight interview as as a chicken. So you
Yeah.
couldn't win. And I mean, there's the thing about comedy, it's always the reaction shot. The laugh,
Mm.
at least in American comedy, a lot of the laugh comes on there's the joke, and then you cut to the person reacting to it. And in that situation, you just ask a question and cut to the chicken, and
Yeah.
it works. The
Yeah.
downside was it was physically exhausting. It was so hot.
Yeah.
I had them put a fan in the suit, but we couldn't leave the fan on during an interview because of for sound issues.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
the good news, it was it was the 90s. It was a simpler time. People wanted to be on camera.
Right.
They were just thrilled to be getting attention. I think the world has changed now that anyone can put themselves on the internet. So
Yeah. Oh, that's wild. And from there to like Nickelodeon and so many of the sort of long term contracts that you had working in animation and children's shows, what was your focus through the comedy lens there? And how did that fit with animation?
well, everything everything sort of came from Crackers because someone from the Henson company saw that and they're like, "Oh, you can do a walk around." I'm like, sure, yes. This
Yeah.
is the thing I've learned about Hollywood. Just say yes.
Right.
People ask, "Can you write a song?" Yeah. Can you direct? Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And then figure it out on the way. And at
Right.
that point, I'm like, sure, I can do a walk around. I'm like, what's a walk around? And a walk around,
Mm.
it turns out, is that suit. It's like Big Bird,
Yeah.
and so I somehow got their attention and I pitched some ideas. And I was a huge, huge Muppet fan growing up. The Muppets, I
Mm.
mean, no one seems to remember this, but they were an adult sort of brand. There was the
Mm.
Sesame Street Muppets, but then the Muppet Show was like, teenagers and adults would watch it because it was so hip and funny at the time, 70s and 80s. So getting to work there was phenomenal, except for except for one time. One time I was in the studio, and they had all the Muppets laid out in plastic bags. And you think about it, these Muppets are alive in my head,
Yeah.
but I saw them all laid out, and I thought, oh, it's like a Muppet plane crash. They've just
Oh.
these are the Muppet corpses in their body bags. And I was
Yeah.
like, I was kind of upset about it because these are Gonzo was there and he's not moving. Wanted to give him CPR. So, but other than that, it was good. It was a good experience. And from there, we started doing kids TV. I had kids,
Mm.
and had some success in that. I'm also Canadian. A lot of production is done in Canada, so that made a lot of sense. And then that led to the toy and branding world because I did some shows, and I did this one show, Wayside, which was an adaptation of
Mm.
a very popular kids book called Wayside. The Wayside books. There's like three of them.
Yeah. Is that Louis Saka?
Yes, the Louis Saka book.
Yeah, I
Yes,
love those. They're
worked
so
a little bit.
fun.
Worked a little bit with Louis Saka. I don't know if he loved what I did, but
Right.
it was, you know, I do a lot of adaptations, and that you have to finesse that sort of relationship. Um, so that was a success. It got, there's this old saying I heard in TV. It's like, to have a hit show, you need a great concept, a great script,
Mm.
amazing actors, incredible director, and if it's a linear TV, a great time slot, and then you have to hit the lottery. So it's like,
Right.
even then you have to hit the lottery. There's still this X factor of luck. So we got this show. We got great source material. I wrote what I thought were good scripts. We had a great director. We got it. We got on Nickelodeon.
Mm.
Following SpongeBob. Great time slot, and it did really well. Everything worked. It was going to get renewed, and the parent company Nirvana, I think, they didn't want to renew it because it was not toyetic, a word that I hadn't until that time heard. And
Toyetic. What's that?
toyetic, Toyetic.
Yeah.
That is a character in a show or property must be easily translate into
Oh,
toys.
got you.
So Batman is toyetic because he's got a vehicle.
Right. Got you.
Paw Patrol's, that started. It's a toy basically, but Wayside, which is just about kids in a school, there's no
Mm.
toys. Even SpongeBob I wouldn't even call that toyetic. Toyetic's usually
Mm.
action shows.
Mm.
So once I heard that, I'm like, next thing, I'm doing a show with toys.
Right.
So my agent somehow found someone at Lego, and they had just started Ninjago, and I really wanted to work there. I actually animated. I'll send you this after the podcast. I
Yeah.
actually animated myself in Lego, begging for
Oh.
the job because
Oh, did
I
you?
do. Yeah, I do actually have animation skills, and yeah, I made a little Lego figure of myself and made the mouth
Oh.
move and say, "I really want to work for this job. I really want to do this." And it worked. I was second. A lot of jobs I've been second choice, and somehow I get in there. Um,
Oh. That's
And that,
fabulous. Oh, listeners, and watch out for that. I'll share that example because that's a lovely way again of just like
yeah,
I say, you are wildly creative, but then it's
you
had a
have to
practical
be.
payback. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, then we did a show called Legends of Chima, which I think made billions of dollars. I'm not sure. I mean, it went on for 3 years, for over 40 episodes,
Mm.
and that's where I sort of developed this super narrative
Yeah.
kind of concept. If you want to go
Brilliant.
into that,
Yeah, I do. I do want to go into that. And I say, and amazing to like have that very quick zip time travel through. We probably missed out like about 40 destinations on the way to arrive
yeah,
at super narrative.
yeah.
Um, and so I've read about the concept only like through your website, and
Mhm.
I'm very interested in it in the sense of I think we're quite in unprecedented terms, times even rather than terms, unprecedented times in relation to how many different kinds of media and platform and where attention goes and how things are constructed right now. So as a creator, I really want to learn from you about how you at least think about storytelling
Yep.
and design in a thoughtful way. But if we some listeners may have heard different terms like transmedia or whatever, but will have not have heard. And I know it's different, so I'd love to
Connected.
clear up
Yeah.
first of all what you mean when you say super narrative, just on the most sort of basic of levels.
It's adjacent to transmedia. It's very similar. So
Okay.
the traditional model is you create a property,
Yeah.
you create a SpongeBob, a Pokemon, or something, and then you figure out, oh, how can we make toys? Because really, at the end of the day, in animation and in kids TV, you don't make money until you have toys. You could
Mm.
survive, you could pay your bills, you could keep your studio open, but if you really actually want to make money, which most people do, you have to have some sort of consumer products entity.
Mm.
Something's got to be sold out in the real world beyond just a license fee or a production budget. So usually I had previously worked on like the ridiculous shows where they'd always want to add a vehicle.
Mm.
A friend of mine worked on Spider-Man cartoon, and the producers wanted to add a vehicle. Why does Spider-Man need a vehicle when he can
Yeah.
swing through the air?
Yeah.
Because they can sell a toy. So you get all
Right.
these ridiculous things like we have this great property. How do we turn it into a toy? In a super narrative, you start from the top, thinking about all the things that are going to come from this. So it's
Mm.
not just a show. It's a show that's going to be a book. It's going to be a game. It's going to be a toy. It's going to be something we haven't even imagined. It's going to be a live experience. It's going to be something. It's going to be all these things, and you plan right from the start. So like
Mm.
the instance in Legends of Chima, there a character will show up for 5 seconds in the episode, but he has a whole game or he has a whole book series based on him.
Mm.
So you pin him up, put him up here, and then he gets his whole life beyond. And if you're a super fan, and there are tons of super fans, they follow that stuff. Same
Mm.
thing with the video games. They're hinted at. There's things that are hinted at, and you only really experience them when you play the video game. So, there's a couple of video games. The key thing is you create this whole story. There's like all these different pieces of a story, but one's going to go here, one's going to go there, one's going to go there. So you don't have to tell every single thing in the TV show. And these days, even TV shows aren't the launching part. It's it could be social media or something,
Mm.
or something else, or a live experience. And then, but you've created this whole story that all these pieces they're all gonna work with the story, but they're going to be in different media. And
Mm.
part of that was I was just watching my own kids. When they're watching TV, they're on the phone.
Mm.
They're playing a game. They might have the TV and a YouTube channel on. There's so the way people are consuming media now is in so many different ways that rather than just replicating the same thing in each media, you have something that's related to the core story but is different.
Mm.
So what that does is if you see it here in your game, you'll want to go see the show. Or if you see the show, you'll want to read the book. So you'll want to read, the Roblox thing or whatever we're doing. So that's basically a super narrative. But the difference between transmedia is transmedia does something similar, but the difference in super narratives, you think right from the start to
Mm.
do this. It's creatively, it's not hard to do. It's very hard to convince the people with the money that finance these things to actually do them. Lego, they're rich and they're creative, and they're collaborative. They're and think of Vikings, rowing
Mm.
across the Atlantic in unison, to get to the Americas 1,000 years ago. They there's obviously something in their DNA that is very collaborative
Mm.
if they can do that. So when they're able to go to their departments and say, we're going to do this, and we're going to do 6 things: a book, a game, a live event, a toy, a show. One or two or three of them is not going to make money, but it's all, when you add it all together, it's going to be a huge success. In an American company, that's almost impossible to do because every division within a company is competing against the other company.
Mm.
So I can't go into Disney and say it's going to be a show, but we want to support it with this game. The game may not make money. The show's going to make $1 billion, but the game may not. That won't happen because the division head will say, when it comes time for me to get my promotion, they're going to say you lost a bunch of money. So
Mm.
they don't think holistically in the U.S. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm doing some work with a brand called Pudgy Penguins now that does kind
Yeah.
of think that way. They are doing things like that, but that's they're young.
Right.
They haven't been beaten down by the entertainment industry and this corporate structure that pits everyone against each other.
Yeah. And when you do have the most amount of freedom or say to be able to intervene in these kind of processes, where do you like to start and why? Like if you have your ideal landscape as a creator.
Usually I write a treatment.
Mm.
My Bibles, I have story Bibles. Like the Chima Bible was probably at the end of the day over 400 pages because there's multiple characters. It's a toy property with a collectible element, so you have a lot of characters, and all those characters have stories, and some of them
Mm.
have mythologies. I mean, Legends of Chima is basically Game of Thrones with animals. So it's a bunch of
Right.
these sort of competing tribes of animals, and each animal tribe has their own kind of religion or mythology that
Mm.
and their own sort of culture. The story Bible goes into that, and you'll see little bits of it in the show, but then in certain of the the super narrative elements, you'll see more. So I usually just start with this big, broad story, and then and figure out what makes sense to go where. What
Mm.
is this, a live event? Is this a toy? And when I say toys, I mean, yes, we're selling things, but the toy itself is a part of the story. The toy, it tells a story. The cover of the box tells a story. And
Mm.
then in my perfect world,
Mm.
the end consumer, the kids, they take my story and then make up their own stuff. Once I see fan fiction
Mm.
based on my characters, initially, you're always a little shocked to see that because like, what are they doing? But then like,
Yeah.
we won. That's what they love a character so much they're going to spend time making up their own stories. And I mean, that's what kids do when they play. They make up their own stories, and when they get older, they actually write it on fan sites. Of course, a lot of them are, a lot of the fan fiction is about characters having sex that shouldn't be having sex, but
Mm.
you know,
Yeah.
you take your wins where you can get them.
Yeah,
So
yeah, that does seem to be an obsession of our age, doesn't it? In terms of who gets shipped
that
with who,
age,
and yeah,
I
that's
know
very fun.
some of the fans are, they're middle-aged people, I
Yeah,
think.
no, totally. I
Yeah,
mean, of our age, as in like as all living, not necessarily our age group. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. And what do you think? Um, some of the things, some of the mistakes that you can really be prevented if a writer or creator like yourself is brought in who understands this. Like when it's really, when you sit from the outside and it's not working well, what do you think people have not understood, say in terms of character or world or tone? How do you think about it?
Uh, just be aware people lie. It's
Right,
the entertainment industry. And what
right.
I mean by that is I'll go in and everyone will be like, everyone I pitch something like this to thinks it's the best idea ever and that's all they want to do. But
Mm.
at the end of the day, no, they don't. It doesn't end up happening. I mean, I've tried a dozen times, and the Lego thing and Pudgy Penguins might be the only two that are coming close. And even that, has a life of its own, and it's they're doing their other things outside of my story.
Mm.
Yeah, just be aware that everyone's going to love something like this. They're going to love that you're thinking like this because they know.
Mm.
I mean, in the U.S. now, the broadcast networks, if you had a show that got less than, when I started 20 years ago, if you had a show that was less than 5 million viewers or
Mm.
4 million viewers, you got canceled. Now those same networks are only getting like 100,000 viewers.
Right.
So
Gosh.
they have to think outside of the box and not just count count on this model, but it's Hollywood is the most. It's they're so stuck in the 20th century,
Mm.
and there's things that work for them, and they don't want to innovate. So be aware. People people will love your ideas, so they'll but they won't actually do them because they want to do the same old thing that they can know they can count on.
Mm.
Um, Other things, trying to keep track of it. You have to. I create the master plan, the master
Mm.
blueprint with one of these multi-hundred page Bibles, but you have to still pivot. Things are going to work, or not work. And now we have a lot of, especially now we're doing a lot of social media content, and we have all these analytics where we
Mm.
could tell exactly we could tell exactly when people are shutting our stuff off. I could look at a YouTube analytics and tell like when my joke bombed,
Right. Yeah.
and it's not just bombing in a room; it's bombing in front of 100,000 people or more. So you use the analytics and you change. You come up with the best plan, best story ever, but if the audience doesn't like it, you have to move. And sometimes the audience they want the same old stuff. That's always as a creator, you're like, I want to create the most original thing, and then
Mm.
my most original things flop.
Yeah.
So
And
be aware. Please the audience, basically.
yeah. And how do you think about bringing in things like jokes or humorous tone when the audience is potentially so vast? Like, do you picture like your own kids? Your like how do you even calibrate that?
It's very challenging because I do a lot of international work. Because I
Yeah.
mean, the American kids broadcast industry it's in rapid decline, or
Yeah.
it's circling the drain. So but there's still things happening in Europe because they get subsidies from the government, so
Mm.
they're still able to put together their financing for productions. And I end up doing a lot of European broadcasts, and we have to be really careful with that too, because things in America don't necessarily translate, and language references don't translate. Britain, they call lots of things different words. I
Mm.
never understand. There's the exact same thing as a slightly different word. So yeah, I mean, it has to be really broad. You have to sort of take into account language. The less language you can put in, the better.
Mm.
The less current you be, the less news reflecting you can be, the better. I mean, unless you're doing a news show, if you're doing
Mm.
like a TV Nation, but for the most part, you keep it. You have to keep it broad if you want a big audience, or you don't get a big audience, or you just focus on your 1,000 viewers or your 10,000 viewers. That's fine too, and you can make money that way. So, I mean, I
Mm.
think there's no overall answer, but
Yeah.
to reach millions, it has to be pretty broad, nonverbal, and timeless.
Yeah.
Nothing that references anything too specific. And we have huge problems in all my productions with technology. We don't know. You put a cell phone in there, and they may
Mm.
be different 3 years from now when the production is complete. So there are there are
Yeah.
plenty of shows I made by the time the show came out. That thing didn't exist anymore. That whatever it was.
Yeah, it's moving so fast.
Yeah.
And when you do think about, like you've talked about these kind of Bibles that you're building, and you described some of the things that might go into the world. When you're thinking about the characters, um, are again, like how are you thinking about that in terms of a system that can then be expanded? Like, do you just really get to be creative and think, oh gosh, this would be fun? Or are you working off systems and thinking, right, we need these kind of archetypes? How like I can think of so many ways that it could happen. I'd love to know how you actually do think about it.
I try to think of it as the most original thing possible, and based
Yeah.
on people I know, or
Yeah.
parts of myself that I would like to imagine. I'd like to imagine
Yeah.
myself as a hero, or I don't know, race car driver or whatever. Um, but at the same time, I know the audience. They're going to want the archetypes. They're going to want the dumb guy. They're going to want the smart guy, smart girl. It's usually the smart
Mm.
girl these days.
Yeah.
They're going, they're going to want the gadget person. They're going to want the muscle, the strong person. And then in terms of like how it's going to work, beyond the core story. Yeah. I mean, if you want to create something toyetic or something with merchandise, put the car in there, put the vehicle, put all sorts of things but have them make sense.
Mm.
Don't just give Spider-Man a car that he doesn't need. you know give create worlds and characters that require things, and then also just you know keep everything simple at its core. So it's always a simple story with all these layers, and the layers play out in the main format as well as all the other platforms. So like Chima, yeah, I said it was Game of Thrones, but it was really two best friends that had a falling out. That's the entire
Right.
that's the core of the story. There's 100
Yeah.
characters, but it's really about these two a lion, Laval the lion and Krager the crocodile that have a falling out. So
And are there really 100 characters? Because I was reading about in
more,
your
I think
article.
there's more of them.
Is there
I think that,
really?
I mean, that's common with toys. Yeah,
Yeah.
they just especially something that has a collectible element. And every time you buy a Lego set, it comes with a different character. That's part of their business models. Like that's how they get you to get the other sets. Yeah, and I had to name them all. I made most of my name, not only name them, but create
Yeah.
names because it's a merchandise, names that can be trademarked in multiple countries.
Right. Gosh.
So yeah, so I lean towards made up words like Krager, which is Jagger and Dagger and crocodile. He's a crocodile, so Krager, And Laval. I partially grew up in Quebec City, and there was a university there called Laval University, so that's what it's based on. But then that had a problem because there was some, I don't know, Nazi sympathizer in World War II in France that was named Laval. So he almost didn't. Who knew? There's a problem with every single name you come up with.
Yeah.
So I mean, now I use for name generation. I totally that's one of the best uses of AI I find. So give me a list of 50 names of a character like this, and you get out of 50 you might get to a couple handful that are good, and that and that might clear, or you combine them. I mean, that's really one of the best things of AI. I've tried a lot of AI stuff too, and it's helpful. Nothing is submission ready, except the names, and sometimes jokes. Actually, it comes up with some jokes.
And how do you think about prompting it for jokes? Do you tell it the kind of general thing that you want the joke to be about? Or
yes, the more specific information you can give it, the better. I mean, I've even done things like those Bibles I told you about. Put the whole Bible into ChatGPT and say, tell me some stories based on this, or come up with some characters. And it's a lot of garbage, but the more you can give it, the more of a better response you can get. I know AI is sort of heresy to praise it at the moment, but it's really good for the stuff I do.
Yeah, and also, I mean, because I have friends and know people who work in children's TV, and my husband worked in children's TV for a long time, and so you just like hearing a lot of conversations that you were talking about the US companies, but just how fast the pipeline is moving now. So just in terms of how creators are able to actually produce things at the rate that's required. So I'm also talking to writers who just for really practical reasons are having to kind of use it as a tool to kind of do things to keep up with the speed at which they're being required to produce.
Well, you're required to produce a lot more for less money. I mean, the fees, certain people at the top of Netflix are making a bundle, but the rest of us doing these everyday shows I'm probably getting paid half of what I was getting paid 20 years ago in general, so, but on the plus side, there's AI. So for idea generation, it's fantastic. For final output, it's terrible. But if you need to just I need, there's 5 kids on a treasure hunt, give me 10 things that might happen to them. And 9 of them are stupid. And one's and it's a starting point. It's I don't see it. I think it's years away from being an ending point, and you could see when you at this point, you could tell when something is AI. I mean, I can tell because I do enough of it. It's kind of the bland. And here's a weird thing. People have been using it for the past 5 years because I started using it before ChatGPT, and if anytime you go on the internet and look up something, it's like 10 best electric vehicles. That's probably it's a blog that someone wrote with AI, but probably like 3 years ago or something. So we've been reading it on the internet, for the past 5 years, which is weird because now the large language models are learning from the internet, which is based on, AI. So it's AI. It's this recursive thing that may be the end of the world eventually, but for now it's pretty good.
Yeah. And So, I mean, so many things I wouldn't have thought of that you've mentioned with regards to super narrative. And I think it's really useful for as a creators to at least sort of like have in mind as a way of thinking about, like you say, watching how people are consuming things and where attention's going. And like you say, your children are having the phone and the this and the that. Like it's, if we're really purist, we may just become completely irrelevant. So
Yeah.
really great to be thinking in these terms. Is there anything that you think that we've missed in terms of like a first dose for people thinking about super narrative for different platforms?
Think big and keep track of the new technology and
Yeah.
try new things. I mean,
Yeah.
try a lot of things, fail fast. I mean, someone smarter than that probably said that, but I mean, that's kind of what we do. I mean, it's a
Yeah.
lot of we don't know if it's going to work. And here's my overall thing I learned. Two things I learned in Hollywood: say yes, pick up the
Mm.
phone when someone calls and say yes. Whatever,
Right.
it doesn't matter what it is. The other thing is nobody knows anything. Even
Right.
after 25 years, I still don't know. I could take better guesses than some other people, but I don't know. There's things I've done. I thought this will be a monster hit, and it flops. And then there's things I thought were the worst projects ever, and they're the ones that live on and on and on. So no one knows. So if you don't know anything, you're on the same level. You're already there.
Yeah. That's very
So don't worry
reassuring.
about it.
Yeah.
And at almost not knowing is better because you'll try weird things that I wouldn't
Yeah.
try because and it'll work. So
And
celebrate your ignorance of the entertainment industry. It'll help you out in the end.
oh, I love that. And I love that. And clearly you have tried so many things and your site is a delight. Like I go on, there's a bit where we can follow through your CV as a game, like with the prompts, and you can put in. I was like, that's just the most fun way ever of looking at someone's work. And I love that you've described how you did the little Lego thing for a job too. So really inspiring to just bring creativity to all aspects, not just our like absolute chosen like purest, most wonderful field of writing, but all of it. I love it.
I'm so glad you mentioned that because I thought it was a really clever way of explaining my credits. It's a little
It
word,
is.
it's a little text adventure that
Yeah. And so
I actually used AI to write the code. I mean, I still had to
love
fix it
it.
up, but it's a text adventure, and no one ever says anything about it. I thought it was real. It's like ridiculous, so look for new ways to communicate.
Yeah.
I mean, so I don't know. I don't know if that works. A week
Well,
from now, I'll have another idea.
I thought it
So,
was really fun. So, listeners, I'm going to put in the show notes John's website, and we'll put some other links in as well. But you can get to go and see it, and it'll prompt. And it's like, do you want like the bit when the music came on, and I could hear your voice coming through? It's really great. So I'm not going to describe it anymore. Listeners, you have to have a go and look for yourself. But again, I love the playfulness. I loved like on your site as well, seeing the game that you designed. That was like across the road that was linked to cars like that.
oh
Honestly,
yes,
there's so many tweets where you can see just how creative
I
John is.
I was a street artist for a little
Yeah,
bit. Yeah,
yeah,
it was 2009, 2010. There was no work, so I'm like, all right, well, what do I do now? I got a grant to do a sidewalk game,
yeah.
and you move across these squares. They're colored squares according to what color car passes, and it was featured in something called Indiecade, which is a festival of games. But I got the local city to pay for it. So I'm technically a street artist and a game
Yeah,
designer, but
yeah.
then I started getting work again, and I left that behind. So just keep trying new things.
Well, exactly. You're a living, breathing example of that. I love it. So, one last question before we wrap up is just what are you currently enjoying watching or reading or listening in the comedy or entertainment field?
Oh,
Or it doesn't have to be current, it can be the last few years.
it's funny because I usually think about the things I don't like.
Oh, do you? Okay, we won't give them a bad shout out, but yeah,
Oh no, I was just complaining today that I thought Oppenheimer was okay.
yeah. I
I,
haven't
I
seen
did.
it.
I've been watching the new Curb Your Enthusiasm. Of course, is really funny.
Oh, okay,
The Larry David Show.
yeah.
Um, really, just I basically get a streaming service for a month and then cancel it. So
Oh dear.
so we happen to have HBO Max this month.
Yeah.
So I'm watching. Oh, um, one of my shows actually, Squish,
Mm.
is now available in the UK on a pop channel. Is there a channel called
Ooh.
Pop or something, an
Okay.
internet channel? So Squish is it's basically a microscopic, an amoeba in middle school, and he's got a friend who's a paramecium, and it's all these microscopic organisms in middle school, kind of like a Charlie Brown sort of
Oh,
character, but everyone's a single celled organism.
that's
All right,
fun. Yeah.
I'll be quick about this. It came out in February 2020 on a French channel,
Yeah.
and what happened in February? We had a character called Vinny the Virus, who
Oh,
so Vinny the Virus is this little ball with spikes, which looked exactly like a coronavirus.
yeah.
So it came out on February 2020 and was immediately pulled off like on March 2020.
Yeah.
No one would touch it because and there are characters that are bacteria and germs. It has nothing to do with coronavirus. It was written years before,
Yeah.
but there's an example of a really good show that got destroyed by circumstances, but
Yeah.
is now coming back. It's on Pop Channel. I think it might be on Gulli in France and a couple of other European networks. Like they've gotten over their fear of my coronavirus shaped bully.
Oh,
So watch that if you can. That would be
yeah.
fun.
Oh, that's a great place and a great place of example of things failing or dying a
Yeah,
death through beyond your control, but then resurrection from
I know.
the virus death. So that's good. Oh, John, my goodness, so many things I could ask about. What a joy getting to hear about some of your wonderful creative projects today, and thank you for introducing us to Super Narrative. Where should people go to find out more about you and your work? And I'll put these links in the show notes.
Just go to my webpage. If you can actually spell my name, it's johnderevlany.com.
Yes.
And I do sometimes respond to people. So if you have questions, you can ask me, but don't ask me about the Angry Beavers. Too many people ask me about Angry Beavers, a show I worked on 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And I probably won't answer questions about Angry Beavers, but any other question, that was, yeah, I will respond to.
Yeah, I'm not sure now whether listeners are going to take the throw down the gauntlet.
They're all going to ask me about Angry Beavers. It was a popular show in the late 90s, early 2000s on Nickelodeon, but I just get too many.
Just a little over it, a little over the beat.
I get too many weird questions. The fans of that show are different than all the other fans of my shows.
Oh, that's so funny.
They're a little obsessive, and and I get some of them do catfishing things where they'll send an email under one name and then they'll send an email under another name saying, "Hey, why didn't you respond to my friend over here?"
Oh, wow.
It's strange things. So no anger. Any other question in the world, I will answer.
Okay, that's
about
fair.
anything.
That's fair. Awesome. I'll put this in the show notes. So fun chatting with you today, John.
You too.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.